Hi, welcome to the Stitch TV show. I'm Lynn.
And I'm Pam. We're happy you're joining us today. The Stitch is an online quilt talk show. It is the perfect soundtrack for your sewing room. In addition to our talk shows, we also put out tutorial videos, virtual stitch-ins, and book clubs. You can learn more at thestitchtvshow.com.
Our show today is brought to you by our friends at EnMart and QT Fabrics. You can learn more about them in the links in the show notes.
So we have on the table right now fabric that I have been sewing with in preparation for Quilt Market and Festival from QT. From their
prep.
basics, all of the sewings.
All the sewings. I've been sewing for Quilt Market and Festival also.
Amazing. That's the only things that we've been texting each other is pictures saying like, 2 more blocks to go.
Yeah. So it's going well, but there's just a lot to do.
What I find interesting, the stories that you hear of people prepping for market are panic sewing at the last minute. And we have been fortunate enough to have our fabrics in advance. So we've got a good,
Yes.
we're like a month ahead of where we see other people. But there will be a lot of frantic computer work on our end to like lay out stuff.
And packaging
programs
things.
and packaging and
Yes, computer work is definitely on my horizon.
Yep.
When this next piece gets done.
Mm-hmm.
I've got to quilt 3 quilts before, or 4 quilts. The whole thing, though, start to finish. And
yes.
I'm going to hopefully talk someone into doing some binding. Hopefully.
Looking at members of production staff. Possibly a cat. Anybody? Bueller. Now, I am excited that our other friends...
she didn't say, yes, I'll do your binding. Okay.
If you get everything prepped, yes, I will do the binding.
Okay.
But that means like it comes to me folded and pressed.
It's already prepped and in the box.
Well, there you go.
There you go.
No problem. We get to see our friends at EnMart again. They were our neighbors at Market last year. Not our neighbors this year.
Don't think they're our neighbors this year. It was kind of sad.
But they're not too far away.
They're down and around the corner.
Yeah.
Yes. We do know our market booth number.
We do. I don't remember it off the top of my head right now.
941.
Well, there you go.
I do. I don't remember numbers well, and for some reason, I got that one down.
I'm just going to show up and follow the signs.
There'll be all these big signs. The Stitch TV show this way. Yeah, no, that won't happen.
Oh, well.
We can only hope. We can dream.
Well, but very excited to be working with both products to prep, and you will see them extensively in our booth, both at Market and Festival.
Right, exactly.
So, what are we talking about today, Lynn?
We're going to be talking about jelly rolls and orphan blocks. We're joined by our couch-size version of the Lucky Star quilt, and this version we made from a Lucky Star quilt-along, and you can find the pattern in our shop at shop.thestitchtvshow.com.
So one of the things that we wanted to chat about was the outcome of the quilt-along. And if you watched the Shop Your Stash video and then you saw me start to make the blocks, you would know that there was a swap out that happened.
Yes.
Because the original intention was the pink on the border was the cornerstones and like the star centers where the teal is now.
Which, let's be honest, I didn't measure anything. I just gave her fabric. And so I set her up.
And I was like, there is not enough of pink to do.
So it was my fault.
Or enough of the teal, actually. There was plenty of pink, but there wasn't enough of the teal to do the border.
Right. So it was my fault. But honestly, it doesn't match my head. And so, when...
I mean, that's a statement.
Yeah, really.
Doesn't match my head either.
Doesn't match my head. Like when I'm laying out fabric, and I don't know if it's a skill set that I have or whatever, but I really can visualize what those fabrics look like in that quilt or in that setting or in that block. I just can kind of see it without it being drawn out. And when she showed me this, I was like, that's not right. And it was immediate for me that because I had this picture in my head of what it was supposed to look like. And so I was like, wait, what happened? Kind of thing. So when I saw this, I was messed up for a while because it didn't match my head.
Quilting brings joy. And confusion.
And confusion. So it was one of those. I mean, I like it, but I think I would have liked it better with the pink and the teal switched. But it is a fun quilt. I love the green. That worked for me completely. And I know that's a bold choice and a lot of people may not.
But we
go
got
there.
questions like, could we go with a non-white or neutral background? I'm like, of course, it's your quilt.
Absolutely. Please do. And then post pictures and show us.
I mean,
Because I think that that's interesting.
Yeah, the only crazy thing to watch out for in fabric choices is directional prints or not. Otherwise, like, go bananas, literally, with your colors.
Yeah.
But directional can get iffy, particularly because this quilt, the blocks are set on point. And so what you think is a horizontal, like, stripe, it turns out, like, tilted this way some and then tilted the other way, and then it starts looking...
And I gave you a couple of stripes, so that was in there.
Yeah. But they turned out okay because you end up... I cut strips across, like, selvage to selvage or with the fabric.
Right.
And so typically stripes are oriented to run along the grain line, like parallel with the selvage. Now, occasionally you get, and I love prints like this, where the stripe is printed on the diagonal, and then you get like a fun candy stripe binding if you use it for that without having to cut on the bias.
Yes.
But
Those
we
are cool.
used the pink for the binding on this one.
Which I love. That looks good. Yeah, I like the piano key. This is one of my favorite patterns that we've done. And you actually wrote it. And it's great for jelly rolls.
It is, which is
Our first topic.
jelly rolls.
What? It
Amazing.
is.
What a
So if
coincidence.
you're intimidated, someone planned that. I think if you're intimidated by putting together your own fabrics, then jelly rolls are great.
Well, and jelly
Answer.
rolls is a term specifically used by one fabric company. Many others call
was
them
gonna
like
say that,
strippy
yes.
sets or, gosh, I can't remember
Valley
the name.
Pops.
Yes, I can't remember the name of what QT uses, but they also have strip sets.
But jelly rolls are made by Moda. But unfortunately, it's like Kleenex.
Yeah.
It's become like Kleenex. Like they kind of coined the phrase, and now everybody refers to them as jelly rolls.
But they actually trademarked the term.
Yes, they did. Well, I think Kleenex did that too, didn't they?
They did.
It's just our culture, the way we talk.
Talk.
It is so not me. Talk.
We're going to talk.
Anyway, I don't know what made... You know what made me do that? So we had friends over last night. We were playing Flux, which is a card game.
Yes, I'm familiar.
And we were playing the Monty Python version. And so the Monty Python version has a card that if you lay it down and you speak in an outrageous accent, then you get to play extra. So the whole table started speaking in these outrageous accents. It was quite fun.
I have
and hilarious.
pirate version of that game, and one of the cards is talk like a pirate and for extra points.
Yes. See, that's a good, it was, so I think if you want to have fun at a party, everybody talks in an outrageous accent, and it's great fun. And no alcohol was involved. It was just funny. Anyway, so that's where that probably came from last night. So, but here's what you need to know about jelly rolls or
Strip sets.
Valley Pops or strip sets or whatever. They are normally 40 to 42.
Strips.
Yes.
With the fabric.
Yeah, with the
So
fabric.
typically between 40 to 42 inches.
2.5 inches by 40 by width of fabric.
Yes.
And 40 of those to 42. Sometimes you'll see 42.
And depending on the fabric line that they're cut from, there may be a single print for each strip, or maybe some strips are repeated.
Yeah.
So it depends on the line. So if you're interested in one and you want to cut down on repeats, then you can take the commercial strip set, and then you can match with fabrics from your stash or swap with friends and try to pull those out.
I don't think this one has a repeat. This is an older one. Yeah, you can tell it's older from where I bought it. That store doesn't exist anymore. I don't think that one is. Now, you can also buy them
Like curated by a shop.
Yes, exactly. So this was curated by a shop, and they packaged it and cut their strip sets themselves. And these are all prints from Mary Englebright, which is a designer and actually a graphic artist.
And typically, when you see a shop that does that, they are mixing across lines of fabric because it's expensive to buy 40 bolts of fabric and then cut up your own strip sets.
Strip sets, yeah.
So typically those will be curated a bit. And if you get someone that works at a shop that has a really good eye for color, you can get really good assortment.
Yeah. Yes. And I like that. I almost like buying the curated from the quilt shop a little bit better than this, because this is predictable and everybody can have, you know what I mean? If I'm getting something curated, then it's, and if you did it yourself, gosh, could you even buy 2.5? I guess you could buy a 16th of a yard.
If they sell it. Typically,
you could do it at Joann's. They'll sell it to you. But you got to hope they cut well.
Yeah. Because that's one of the pitfalls I've got is watch out for the number of strips in the set. If you think you're buying a set that's got 40 strips in it because you're making a pattern that calls for, X number, and you get it and there's only 30, you're like, oh crap, now I'm 10 short.
Right.
But the other thing to watch out for is how they're cut, because they need to be cut so the cut line is, like if this is the folded edge, it has to be parallel. Sometimes it's like that.
Oh, and you get that V.
And you get a weird V cut. And then when you try to even it out,
it's not 2.5 inches.
No. Now, one way to solve for that, just cut it right in the middle of the fold and hope that you don't need
more than 20 inches.
More than 20 inches of a piece, and you're just going to be off grain. You just live with that. Maybe add a little spray starch or some sizing to just help it not be on the bias.
The other thing with jelly rolls, too, is that you have to be, there are some companies that they are pinky, and I think we've talked about this.
Yeah, there's a video on it.
They pink really deep into that.
And that's the zigzag edge, if you're not familiar.
Good point. And sometimes, to me, that can shrink your 2.5 inches.
Right.
By a good 1/4 inch.
Sometimes the 2.5 inch is valley of the pink versus the peak.
Right.
Sometimes it's the peak, and then if it's, I think it's typically about 1/8 of an inch is what most of them do. There are some manufacturers that have a much deeper pinked edge, and then you do start slipping into the seam allowance if you're not exactly accurate on your 1/4 inch.
Right.
And you start to see your seam separate, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, so then you have to adjust your 1/4 inch to, maybe sewing it scant 1/4 or even a fat 1/8 inch, which honestly, I've taken a class from a national teacher, and her entire process is sewing an 1/8 inch seam allowance for all of her quilts. Now, that's hard for me. Not to say that I haven't done, if you're doing really micro piecing, you can do an 1/8 inch and it makes sense. But I do think you should shorten your stitch length if you're doing an 1/8 inch.
Yeah, that makes sense. One other way to compensate if you're worried with such a skinny seam allowance, if it is for, a casual quilt, not an art quilt, but if it's one that's going to get used
and washed,
children, pets, all of it, when you're quilting, make sure that your quilting lines go over every seam. That way, if there is a seam failure in the piecing, it's not going to just kind of
travel.
So
travel. That's not a word.
It's not a word. So similar.
It's like an explosion ravel.
What I had done on this quilt not necessarily would work, although I did a meander in the background and covered all of the seam lines between the sashing and the cornerstones. There is no crossover between the motifs themselves, the stars in the background. So were that the case, I would need to go with just a complete all over, or have my design kind of go from the star out into the background, the field of the center. So that's the trade-off.
It is a trade-off.
And it's not a bad thing. There's no good-looking designs.
I think that there's workarounds to how those pinks end up for whatever jelly roll you're using. The other thing that jelly roll is kind of known for is the explosion of lint in your sewing room when you unravel one.
And it's not good for people with asthma.
Oh, yeah.
I call it pre-cut lung because the lint just, and you're coughing. You can cut down on that before you unwrap.
Right. So if you have this.
If you have the roll, I've even done it on some of the folded strip sets, but you take a lint roller or tape and just do it over the edge. And I have honestly, on a commercial strip set, have used up to 3 different sheets from the lint roller, just sucking up bits of lint.
Yeah, because if you open this, it just is like, the only thing worse is Minky.
Which we love.
We do.
But you need a vacuum cleaner. And no fans in your sewing room. It just turns into a winter wonderland.
It's not a pretty thing. It's not. Yes, the lint is definitely something you need to take for the commercially cut, whatever. But how often do you make your own jelly rolls? Like, you do a lot, right? I mean, I know I did this one for you.
It's not so much that I'm cutting my own jelly rolls. It's that I am substituting in fabrics from a commercial assortment, so it gets a little more life and depth to it.
So talk about that, because you have a kind of formula on how you do that,
Yeah, but
right?
I borrowed it liberally from my friend Jay over at artquiltmaker.com.
Well, thank you, Jay. Awesome. All right, so these have like 40
strips. So
40 strips.
10%.
Okay.
10% of the fabric in your commercial assortment, pull it out, and maybe it's a print you don't like or it's too much of the same thing, and then bring in from a whole other fabric, either borrow from a friend, like do a swap, or you look at your stash, and that gives it a little more depth, particularly because a lot of fabric lines are designed with all medium values. And sometimes you miss the depth of a range from light to dark. It's like medium, 100% medium. And they're very attractive and we're drawn to that, but your quilts can come out looking a little flat. Like in here, I made sure that there were black prints brought in to some of the center stars, that there's a couple where there's not as much contrast, had I been thinking about it, not just like pulling for the sake of like,
yeah, I do that too. I just pull for the sake of whatever.
So to me, some stars are more successful than others in terms of contrast and value and being able to see the pattern.
I think that adds interest because, so the black and orange one's really, it's got a good edge to it. You can very much see it. This one's a little bit less. Mm-hmm. But I think that contrasted against each other gives you more reasons to look around. Mm-hmm. It lets your eye travel the quilt.
It gives you incentive to look longer.
Yes. And I always think it's very successful. Any quilt is super successful if it's attractive from a distance. You're still wanting to walk up closer to it and be 2 feet away from it. And then the really, studious...
How did they do that?
How did they do that? Yes. That's a really successful quilt. If you see people go, oh, look at that, and then keep walking towards it to where they're right up on it saying, how did this happen? Or what technique did they use? I like that. So, we should say this too. Jelly rolls or strip sets are normally about 3 yards of fabric.
Yes.
So I think it's surprising. I think when you look at the price tag of what those are, which is about $40 right now.
Yeah, in the U.S., they're about $40. Yeah. I've seen them for $43. I've seen them for $35. Kind of varies. And it'll vary based on how many strips are in there as well.
Right. But that's 3 yards of fabric. So I think you're going to have to think about that too.
And it's already cut for you. Yeah. It's not just...
Although I like cutting. I know a lot of people don't like cutting. I kind of enjoy the cutting process.
I get a little aggravated by it, mostly because I'm always having to move cats out of the way.
Yes. Well, we saw the CAT scan that Nina provided the other day.
So far, CAT scan shows that all my blocks are good.
Right. Good job. Good job. The Slookies just sleep through the whole process. They don't even care. No, they're just hanging out.
I think she's just pleased that I pick fabric that looks good with her.
Right, because she's an orange cat. She does. Because orange is the best color.
It is the best color if you want to use cats in your advertising. That's why Morris the cat was orange. That's why Garfield was orange.
There you go.
Well, it's hard to photograph black cats because they don't get a lot of, the light reflection.
That's true with black dogs, too.
Yeah. So the orange pops on the cat.
And he's hard to photograph. I get more photographs of Josie who's they consider a red dog. She looks kind of orange. But, yeah, then I do have Jock. He's black.
When you are cutting your commercial strips, are there any specialty rulers that you particularly like? Or?
Oh, that's a good point.
That's why I'm making it.
Creative Grid has got some specialty rulers that I have used, and when you sew the strips together, then you cut out the shapes, and it, because it's a sewn strip set,
it gives you some alignment.
Like I did one
lines.
Yeah, I did one that was a tumbler. And
Kimberly Einmo has a good one that
Yes.
goes with her books. She's got a couple good books on sewing strip sets.
And then there's one that's a tube. And I don't I have it, but I've not used it.
Well, it's an exciting opportunity. So the fabric that this quilt is from, it's a shop program that teaches people. It's 12 different methods for the 12 blocks, and it's many different ways to make half-square triangles, flying geese, and quarter-square triangles. And one of the half-square triangle methods is the tube method, but without a specialty ruler. So it is possible to use some of these techniques without having special rulers. You can just use your regular, I use a 6x14 commonly, and it has the marked 45-degree angle on it. So
It's one of my favorite rulers, the 6x14.
So the things to check for, make sure there's not the V-cut when you're cutting, and don't pre-wash your jelly rolls.
Oh, yeah, good tip. Don't pre-wash your jelly rolls.
You'll do that once.
And then you'll be like, oh, never doing that again.
Yes, I did it once.
I've never done it.
And I at least didn't stick them in the dryer, but when they came out of the washer, it was just like it was like the museum for the giant world's largest yarn ball. Like that.
I haven't done it.
And so
I think because I knew you did it.
Yeah. And so I hung them up to air dry because I have like a old school clothesline thing on my, like the thing that kind of pops up like an umbrella. And so it looked real cool out on my back porch for a while with like all the little fabric
streamers.
Strips. Yay. Only do that once. Don't
pre-wash.
And if you have pre-washed your other fabric, you'll be okay. Typically, the commercial strip sets are of a high enough quality of fabric that they're not going to shrink wildly. Just get the
Although,
if it's a very loose weave.
Let me say this, though. You can get some of these strip sets at off-brand type places now that you weren't able to. You used to only be able to get these strip sets at quilt stores.
Yes.
I have seen them at Tuesday Morning. I have seen them at Walmart. I have seen them at, which are not your typical higher quality fabrics. I'm not saying that they're not good fabrics. All I'm saying is that they're not as high a quality. So the shrinkage may be higher.
And it's the quality of the gray goods, so the thread that went into weaving the fabric, as well as the density of the weave.
Yeah.
Kind of like batiks have a much denser weave than regular commercial fabric cotton prints.
Right.
So just kind of give it a feel. If it feels
Rough.
like your other fabric,
You're probably okay.
well, if it doesn't feel like,
You're not.
right.
Yeah. If it feels similar, you're probably okay. But if it's rough, if you can feel the dye, and that's almost a greasy feeling.
Pebbly.
Yeah,
Almost pebbly.
Especially in batiks, you can feel the dye in it.
Yeah.
Definitely use color catchers
Absolutely.
on those. But
More
I
than
think,
one.
and if you can see through it, some of the fabrics you can literally take up to the light and see through compared to something you bought at a quilt store. You can tell that there's difference in the finishing of it, in the gray goods, and how tightly it was woven. So I would say yes, typically, but since I've seen them at these other places, not that it's bad fabric, and hey, they're good deals.
Yeah.
Just beware that.
Yeah. Keep an eye out that
Right.
after the wash,
Right.
there may be some difference in how it. And I mean, I don't necessarily encourage you to compensate for that with over quilting it.
No.
Because particularly a lot of times we're buying those like, oh, I need a quick baby gift. I need a, get well gift.
Right, yes.
And so you're just like, the only place you have time to go to is one of these big box stores. And it's like,
I've made lots of quilts from those fabrics.
Oh, I have too.
And they're great. They're not my preferred. If I,
wash it in cold.
Yes. Yeah, definitely.
And then write a little slip when you're giving it to the person, or just remember like, oh, only wash this in cold.
Right. I like the idea of bringing in your own fabrics because then you kind of own that whole quilt, the whole design process of the quilt. And you're just using the jelly roll as your starting place or your bouncing off place.
Yeah, I mean, these people, the fabric designers, like, get paid to design. They're typically pretty good at it.
Yeah.
So
They're
like
really good at it.
Take advantage of their color sense.
Exactly.
Anything else you want to say about jelly rolls?
I like them. Here's how I like them. I stack them because they're so pretty. And I just have stacks. I have a hard time opening my jelly rolls because it's like I really need to know what I'm going to use in them. This one, actually, we made. It's funny, I pulled this one. I had 2 of these, and this is one of the ones that we made a Lucky Star version
that's
of.
right.
Yeah.
Now, one other note. So, for the ones that come with a ribbon wrapped around them, save the ribbon because you can always use that to tie up something else later. Don't just chuck
exactly. I do. I save the ribbon. I usually throw away there's usually a
rubber band or something.
Rubber band, yeah. I don't necessarily keep that, but.
All right.
Yay, jelly rolls.
And
now we're going to take a closer look at Lucky Star, and we'll be right back. Hi, welcome back. And the next topic is
orphan quilt blocks or orphan quilt bits. Because they take all kinds of forms. Leftovers. Won't you?
I have leftover waffles. No.
Apropos of nothing.
Usually that's true. Okay, so orphan quilt blocks.
Yeah, so I brought this topic up because...
I'm hoping you tell me why.
Oh, exactly.
I'm not real sure.
The last video in the Lucky Star Quilt Along series, there was a bonus, like, dingleberry, let's be honest. I had gone through the quilting design and what I was doing for this, and then I showed some of the leftover pieces that I got, because in the process of making this quilt, you can end up with bonus half-square triangles from making the star blocks. There were extra pieces from the piano key border, and then when you are cutting the fabric from the mitered border, you get like this whole other mirrored miter thing happening. And we'll have a link to that video. It'll be in like that corner, a little eye dot right there. So you can fast forward towards probably like the last minute or two of that to see those. But I love to use those leftover pieces, not only because I just don't like waste and throwing like big usable chunks away, but I turn them into test pieces. And they end up being table mats, or in my case, I make a lot of smaller quilted pieces that I use to cover things in my sewing room. So when the cats do sit on them, they're not getting my real stuff hairy, just like these little mats that then I can chuck in the wash. So I make a lot of randomly small quilted pieces.
Right.
So I can practice different quilt designs, and I'm not wasting fabric.
They kind of look like this.
Yes, they do look exactly like that. Ta-da!
Because I do the same thing. Yeah. Not that I have cats that, sit on my stuff. That's not it. But like I'm testing a block for something that we're going to then write a pattern about, or I'm, it's leftover bits from a quilt that we've designed, and I'm like I don't want to necessarily throw that away. And they're great, like little table mats. And I change them out. Like I just, put fall decorations up. Why? I'm not real sure, because it'll be a while.
90 degrees. 90 degrees here still.
I like the meme that just came out that said, it's fall in Atlanta. What does that mean? Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Still hot.
It is still hot. But I put the fall decorations out and, changed those. So it was nice to see just these little kind of pieces that you can put on tables or in tables. And I put them on ottomans and you're right. I can throw it in the wash. I can, it can be accents to your dining room table, to your kitchen table, to a breakfast bar.
Well, even our guild
on the mantle
was asked by our local Meals on Wheels group to put
that's
together
right.
500 placemats.
Yes, 500 placemats.
And that already sounds like a lot. It sounds like even more when you consider that our annual goal for like all placemats was 300, and this is 500 holiday-specific ones on top of that.
Right.
So more than doubling the goal in the output. And so orphan blocks are great for that. And even if you're not donating them, but just to have a fun assortment of placemats, like liven up your breakfast table.
And what a great non-committed piece.
I made you a quilt.
That you
it's 12 inches square.
Can practice different quilting techniques, try out different designs that you don't want to commit to a full-size quilt.
Like pebbling.
Or just like straight line, like this has like switchbacks. But it was very like precise. Sometimes my switchbacks are really or like the clamshell, or it's just a way to practice how you can do something on a much smaller scale. And this was me practicing on my domestic, which is, I'm not as good a quilter on my domestic machine as Pam is. I'm definitely much more of a long arm quilter, but this was me. Hey, I want to get better at that. I don't want to do a, quilt wrestling video where you're dealing with a king size quilt under a, smaller domestic machine. This is easy. So, yes, I think it's great. And then I'm telling you, you give this to someone, they think you're amazing. Just amazing. So, yes. So what else do you do with them? Do you say, now, like, how small bits do you save?
So typically, when it comes to scraps, because a lot of what I do with leftover bits as I'm cutting is trim them down to my usable scrap sizes, which is something I do that doesn't work for everybody. Depends on the kinds of quilts that you make. Doesn't work for Lynn.
Me. I've tried. It's horrible.
So,
did not work.
But these are like units, and so they could be 2-inch, 3.5-inch, or 5-inch. And I end up with a lot of assortments that measure 3.5-inch square because I've sewn together 2-inch squares, and I'm like, I'll just sew together 4 blue squares and get now a slightly bigger blue square made out of 4 smaller squares, which would be called a 4-patch if it had contrasting fabric.
It's still called a 4-patch.
Yeah, so I have those that, get saved and chucked in the bin now it got graduated up to 3.5-inch from the 2-inch bin.
Oh, good for you.
It's like kindergarten graduation. It's not that big a deal. Hey, good job. You didn't bite anyone. You passed. Go to first grade. All right, so I was doing a pattern that we're going to release at market, and one of the techniques is the sew and flip for the corner square triangle that what you call it? The stitch and hope method.
Yes.
Sometimes where you don't mark it, but you're like, small enough I could do that.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what I was.
Curved. Yeah.
So there were some that I was using a 2.5-inch square on the corners. So when I trimmed that, I saved those. So I can sew those they're already stacked for half square triangles. So I will probably sew those.
Yeah, that's what happens with these.
Yeah.
Because those were 2.5-inch. And I think I ended up, they measured 1.25 inches finished. And I got groupings of blocks and put them together of like kind of 4 groupings. It's not a real block name to my knowledge. But I'm like, well, now I got 3 of these. It'll go in something.
It'll do something.
It'll be a table runner.
Now, I will say that the second block that I was working on, this is a 2-block quilt, the corner square triangle was an inch. So
Nope.
when I trimmed those, I threw that part away. Yeah. I'm like, those are tiny. I guess you could have saved them for that mosaic that you did. Like out of the, what was the lady's name? The fish that you did where it was just the mosaic beds.
Don't remember, but it's in a previous
Yes, it is.
show.
Now, when I do classes, like when I've taken classes and I didn't want to commit to the quilt that they wanted us to make, because I'm a rebel, I just made pillows. There's one. Do here. Do.
I want to hold the purple one.
Okay. Here's this one. So these are just pillows that sit on my bench that I have in my library. And that sounds so important that we have a library in the house. But honestly, it's that formal living room that you don't know what to do with.
That you're not supposed to go into if you're a kid.
Yeah. We just put a bunch of bookshelves in there, and so we call it the library. It just has bookshelves in there. That's it. So we have a bench in there, and I just made these pillows to go in it. And it's got the, these are kind of dirty, but it's got the
Envelope style back.
envelope style back. And the key to make these is you make the size as big as the pillow. Like, so if the pillow's 12 inches, you make this 12 inches.
And so when you sew the seam allowance, it makes it a firmer pillow and you don't have floppy corners.
Right. Exactly. All right.
So pillows are an option, table runners. Another thing you can do that our guild has done before is do orphan block swaps where
Right.
so let's say, for example, I was sick of looking at all these fabrics and I had these bits and I was like, I'm done.
Here you go.
So finding a friend, listing for a swap, taking them to guild. We have free to a good home table. Sometimes we do organized swaps. So that's another option if you're in a group and you want to mix things up and just get it out of your house.
Right.
Make a trade and take someone else's leftovers that will inspire you that you're not sick of looking at.
What I just did, and I've done this with 3 orphan blocks groups. Like I had one set of orphan blocks, and maybe we'll hang that quilt behind us one day. That was from a class, and I didn't want to commit to the whole quilt, so I just made a wall hanging. And so I find an inspirational quote or I make up something. This is an orphan row by row because if you all have done the row by row, which is usually in the summer.
It's in the U.S.
Right.
and parts of Europe, maybe?
I don't know. I don't know.
Canada.
That's
It's primarily a
not Europe.
North American thing.
That's not Europe. I'm pretty sure.
I know, but I thought it branched out, but I couldn't remember how far it branched.
I don't know. We probably should. This is, so I had this row, and it was these ducks, right? And I was like, what am I going to do with that? So I just made these Lady of the Lake blocks that went with it, and then just put in Be the One, because this one's kind of,
Quirky.
yep. So, and it's just a wall hanging that hangs in my hallway.
Does it? Because you just finished it. Has it hung up in your hallway yet?
Yeah, I just took it down today.
Okay, well, all right.
You just, you walked by where it was hanging.
Oh, okay.
I took it. She hadn't been over since I had hung it up.
That is
The others are already hung up in the other part. I'll show you later.
okay.
Anyway, yes. So that's another thing. Make wall hangings. And you can find tons of inspirational quotes on Pinterest or, Google them or whatever. I just used, and of course I love applique, so that's part of it. But just do an inspirational quote, put a few blocks with it, give it away, or hang it up. And I am just looking for more wall space in my house because now I'm like, what else can I hang
over
up?
there.
That's where the Hamilton thing's going that I have to get Mike to hang up. That's behind Ray right now. Anyway. So I'm looking for more wall space because I'm thinking these orphan blocks need either a good home
Why
or
don't you just
they
make Mike wear a sandwich board and then you could swap it out seasonally?
That would be good.
seems legit.
I'm seeing.
I'm not
them.
addressing the
He's
comment
like,
from the peanut gallery where he said,
"No."
and nothing else. Ladies, gents. Also for sale from Amazon, brain bleach. No offense, Mike, love you. Strong platonic feelings for you. But there's an option.
There is an option. What were we talking about again?
Wall hangings.
Orphan blocks.
Wall space.
I like, but I think that those are just a nice gift to give someone. Just make a cute little
vignette for 'em.
encouragement, saying something, that will.
Depending on the size, I've done like little tiny coasters. I just did one this week for someone.
Yeah, you did a little wall hanging for me that said,
I'm sorry, I panicked. We could tell that story. But that wasn't an orphan block. That was a thread painting thing. So we had gone to a Mexican restaurant for
her
my
birthday.
birthday. And we invited my birthday. We had invited another friend.
Let's be clear, it was not my birthday.
No. This other friend is an extrovert. This other friend has no qualms about telling anyone around, it's her birthday. So in Mexican restaurants in the United States, it's pretty common that they bring out a sombrero and they plop it on your head and then they start singing loudly. And part of my plan for this whole birthday thing was like cheese dip, but not a weird sombrero on my head. And so they come out and they start singing and I'm like, it's her birthday. And so they plunk the hat on Lynn's head and they start singing. And then we got some free churros or whatever that was.
I don't know. Yeah.
Anyway,
something.
So Lynn took a hit for me.
Yeah, I did. And I hate putting their hats on because it just kind of grossed me out a little.
Well, because it's been on a lot of people's heads.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like trying not to let it touch my head.
Like she's raising the roof with the sombrero.
I'm like trying to not. Yeah.
So anyway, she got a little wall hanging that says, sorry, I panicked with a sombrero on it.
Right. So see, and now somebody was in my sewing room the other day and they were like, what does this mean? I'm like, well, let me tell you.
Tell the story.
Kind of how the good friends I have. But I did eat most of the ice cream on that because I was like, y'all made me wear this.
Yes. And that is why we don't go out to restaurants on either of our birthdays anymore. Especially with extrovert friends.
Oh, her birthday was the other day.
I know.
I wished her a happy birthday.
Should have sent her a sombrero. And
Yeah,
some churros.
really. And some churros. That would have been great. Anyway.
Orphan blocks.
Orphan blocks. So I think they're cool to just, because people are impressed that you know how to sew, number one. So I think if you make just a little table mat, wall hanging.
Yeah. I mean, if you're into
give 'em away.
math, you can sew them into the back of the quilt that you're working on. I have seen Bonnie Hunter has taken just all orphan blocks that happen to be similar sizes and just make an entire quilt back out of orphan blocks, which is a commitment.
Yeah, it is.
I can't let that many accumulate. Like,
Right.
no. No. So the ones that I've made out of this will end up, two of the bits will be quilted and used as mats or whatever in my sewing room or other parts of the house. The others I think will get put into a donation project once I kind of amass enough of similar colorway.
Right.
So
they're great. I mean, you're never not going to have them.
there's always going to be leftover bits.
There's always going to be leftover bits. And I think part of your scrap strategy is, how do I use them? Or how do I, feel like I'm giving them away to the right place?
Yeah.
Where somebody else can use them and not just throwing them away. I really have a hard time throwing something like that away.
Yeah.
Not because I made it, more because it feels wasteful.
Yes.
And I want it to be used.
Yeah, and fabric costs money.
And fabric costs money. Yes. Now
Why are you going to throw money away?
Right. So anyway, yay, orphan blocks.
So, which is worse, orphan strips from a jelly roll or maybe orphan blocks from a quilt? You can leave a comment and let us know which one you think is more egregious. You can do that in our Facebook group, What's Up Stitches, or on the blog. And that's all we have for this episode. Today's show is made possible by EnMart and QT Fabrics. Find links to these wonderful companies in the show notes for today's episode.
We'd like to thank 77 Peaches and Big Think Productions for helping produce The Stitch. If you've enjoyed the show, please like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to turn on notifications on YouTube.
Our next virtual stitch-in is Friday, October 11th at 7 p.m. U.S. Eastern, broadcast live on our YouTube channel. Our book club is temporarily interrupted due to travel, but stay tuned for a special How Should I Quilt This episode in its place at the end of September.
All these details and more can be found on our website, The Stitch TV Show, along with links to purchase fan gear, quilt patterns, video classes, and tune in next time for more quilting chat with friends.